Anywhere of time. Last section is self-help, I think. So there are two ways we can help ourselves. One is as a community, and one is as individuals. To talk about flood groups, what it is, what the benefit is, what the powers of it will be, so on.
I will, but as you probably know, I failed dismally in trying to get a flood group together in Wellington, which I tried to do after the November floods. Every house in the village, or in fact every house in the parish, had a newsletter, a double-page spread on flooding, including a call for volunteers. Working with Councillor Prince and Councillor Williams, we put a strategy together to how we could run a flood group, from people walking the brook regularly to having people who help with sandbags, having an early warning system, a bit like Neighbourhood Watch used to work, with tiered calls, one person per 5, so on. We got a risk assessment done, and we put out the call for volunteers. We had 5 in total, not including parish councillors. Of those 5, 3 properties would be subject to serious flooding themselves, so probably unlikely that they want to go out and help somebody else when they're actually flooded themselves. We had one person who was prepared to help with sandbags, and we had one person who was prepared to help with telephone calls. And so on that basis, it was a complete and absolute dismal failure. There are villages that make it work. I can't remember the name of the one I was reading about recently. They've got 10 self-appointed, albeit flood wardens, who run a scheme between them. Councillor Williams is currently working on a scheme to close roads at Wellington Mill and also at the ford. The mill will protect properties. The ford will stop silly people getting carried away and other people having to risk their lives to get them out. That hasn't been easy. We've got volunteers, and we need 4 volunteers in each area. That's been like pulling teeth. But we've got 4 down now at the ford, and we're hoping that we've now got 4 up at the mill. We've got 1 to follow up, haven't you, Colin? Staggeringly, it's been so hard to get people even to offer to put barriers up. So I don't know. I mean, it is possible. Villages do make it work. They make the road closures work, and they make flood groups work. But somehow there seems to be some apathy about it, which I'm really quite upset about. The people who are likely to flood on the north side of the road need help from the people on the south side of the road who aren't going to flood. And we just didn't get anybody coming forward. If anybody wants to set up a flood group, then please carry on. All the information is in the newsletter. I can provide the strategy that we put together. I can provide the paperwork to register the flood group with Herefordshire Council. The road closure scheme has already been registered with them, and we've had the maps approved. I don't really think there's very much else I can say. One of the things I think was put here is time commitment. How long's a bit of string? It doesn't really need all that much commitment until we flood, or until we're about to flood. Maybe a group should have a regular meeting and just keep in touch with one another. But it isn't any great time consuming. It's not like being a parish councillor where you've got to spend hours on it. So anybody who wants to set up a flood group, then please do.
Is there any available support from Herefordshire Council about this, practical or financial, in relation to flood groups?
So I guess that the one thing I wanted to say was the council, is really committed to looking at flooding. We have just started the flood response programme. So Councillor Nick Mason has been appointed by the leader, if you like, to spearhead that piece of work. And I know Nick's really keen, really enthusiastic, and there was an online meeting, I think, held around flood groups, communities interested in getting involved in some kind of group. There's another meeting, I think, planned for next week. So, I would encourage people, to have a look on the council website and register if they're interested in hearing a bit more in terms of, some of the things that are underway, some of the things that are planned for the future. It's really tricky. I hear what Jen is saying. Yes, some hamlets, some villages have been able to, push forward with flood groups. Just because of the demographics, because of the numbers, but it is tricky. We'll certainly do what we can, and it'd be great if we can get the community flood signage scheme up and running in the village. We'll certainly do what we can to make that as straightforward as we can. We're batching it as a trial. We are listening to some of the concerns. But I guess we're conscious, as Jen has said, you do need the volunteers, because we don't want to set you guys up to, not to be able to do it. But yeah, there is some more information on our web pages around the community flood signage scheme. There's a bit more information on our web pages around, community flood groups. Something else that you may have seen is that we are getting a visit from something called a flood pod. Between now and the end of the month, so that'd be an opportunity to talk to somebody, Mary Long Dono, who's a independent flood expert, and she'll be showcasing a number of different things that people can think about, consider implementing within their own properties, and that's going to be, I think, in Lemsa, probably the nearest one. So have a look at that information, and and take the opportunity to talk to Mary and others who will be there.
Thank you very much. Do you want to say that to them?
Colin and I are both going to attend the meeting on Tuesday that Nick Mason is running. Colin went to the first one, I'm going to this one, so we can report back to the parish council on it.
Okay. I'm going to take 5 minutes to run through the last few questions, if that's okay, which is about self-help on an individual level as opposed to a community level. Someone says the council should put flood defences on their doors, which would protect the council properties. The owners should not be put on the tenants. This might refer to housing associations. I think the general advice there is speak to the housing association. That applies to you. Surely there could be something to reduce the likelihood of flooding in Brookside in relation to the brook. Claire, can you say something?
This is along the same lines as the previous questions. Yeah, I'm aware that there is flooding from the brook there into Brookside, but it goes back to the same thing about if the brook's full. There's not much we can do to stop it breaching its banks. I mean, there has been an issue there with the eroded bank that eroded back 3 years ago, which connectors are going to be doing something about, just to stop that from being a problem. But that's about all I can say. That was reported to me just because there was a fear that the bank would collapse there and make things worse. But other than that, there's not really, short of just maintaining the brook there, that can be done.
Thank you. Does the council assist with flood defence costs, and how does it work on a listed building?
So in terms of the work that WSP have done, so I'll share that information. And like I say, one of the things coming out of that is property flood resilience. How that would work is that we would be approaching the Environment Agency for funding to undertake individual property surveys, which would identify the types of measures that would be needed. From that, we'd then be able to cost up and understand what's required in order to deliver PFR to a number of properties. So I guess really, we'd be seeking to access funding and to get the surveys from the Environment Agency, and then working with them to work up the business case for getting money for the actual measures. In terms of listed buildings, and obviously I'm conscious within a conservation area as well. The Environment Agency is actually delivering PFR at the moment in Erdesland. Obviously, people are going to know there's a number of really old, buildings, in Erdesland. So the Environment Agency are working really closely with our conservation colleagues just to understand, what's needed. Fundamentally, they're looking to, make sure that the PFR measures work, don't cause any issues to, individual properties. So, through that project, we've been able to, establish really good links and, a good working relationship, so that, the EA know what our conservation and heritage colleagues need, and vice versa. They know what the Environment Agency are looking to deliver. So hopefully we can be as joined up as we can be.
Thank you. And are there any planning rules about installing floodgates across drives and doors on properties?
So if we were going to be delivering, PFR, to a number of properties, then one of the considerations, around as well as any, planning considerations, flood walls, might require, depending on, what's proposed, that might need, planning or consent from conservation colleagues. But also, flood risk would be a consideration, alongside that as well. So, we'd be linking in with colleagues, say, from Alpha BT to assess that.
Thank you. And Anne-Claire, exactly what can people do and what can't they do to protect their property, especially as regards building bunds? Because we've had a couple of properties that have transgressed and one had to remove those totally.
So people have got the right to protect their property. I think that, this particular one that's been brought up recently, which is a bund that's been put down at the bottom of the village, just downstream of the ford. The IDB obviously is an enforcement authority on the brook, but we can't stop someone from protecting their property, but we can advise them that if they do, like that particular instance, it extends right the way down. It's actually stopping the water from going onto land as well as the property. So I've advised them that if they could just remove the bund back, so it protects their property and not prevents the water from flooding out onto the field there. But we have to be very careful, because if I told them to take it out and then they flooded, they could come chasing after us because we've stopped them from doing that work. But I have advised them as well that if you feel that you've been flooded and it's been caused by someone else, you have got a right to take them. You have got a right to chase them up on that. If you have to approve it, which is always the way. I mean, there was an instance 3 years ago. There was a bund at the top of the village which we asked to be removed, and it was removed. But that was only because that was just flooding the land. It was coming across land. It wasn't going to protect the property at all. Sorry, that's a bit of a roundabout way. I hope it's answered some of the question.
Thank you very much. We've talked about flood pods. The only other thing is, Holly, there's a Facebook group called, for anybody who might be interested, it's like a private online community specifically for people who have been flooded across the UK, actually. Do you want to say a tiny bit?
Yes, I don't know that much about it, but it's a UK. Yes, it's an organisation. It's called UK Flooded People, I think, and essentially it's a group where people are affected by flooding can come together to get advice and to learn from each other about ways to combat the issue. So it's a community for flooded people, and I did send the email to a few people, but I can definitely.
I sent it to my clerk.
Excellent. But yeah, it's a relatively new thing, but it's a support network essentially for people who have been flooded.
Thank you, everybody. That actually is the end of the pre-submitted questions and comments.